Welcome to the making of the Kodable Valentine's Day event. Before we get started, just to make this a little bit more fun, we have hidden teddy bears throughout this presentation. Kiddos in your classes, while you're looking at the slides and while you're learning about the creation of the Kodable Valentine's Day event, we would love for you to have your teacher comment when you find them, just to kind of keep things exciting and fun. My name is Emmy. I'm a former teacher, and I'm on the teacher team. We have Danielle, who is also a former teacher and on the teacher team. And then we have Chloe, who is our senior game developer. So she is the one who created both of these events. So you're going to learn from her today about what it takes to be a software or a game developer. And so it's going to be really exciting. What are we learning today? So we are going to be talking about three things today. So we're going to talk first about how the Valentine's Day event was created in both Kodable Basics and Kodable Creator. So Kodable Basics is the game with the fuzzes, and then Kodable Creator is our newest game where you code and create your own video games. So the second thing we're going to be learning today is why Chloe loves to code. So you'll be able to ask her questions, anything you want. The first thing, whenever we want to make an event, so say, for example, we decided that we wanted to host a Valentine's Day event within Kodable Basics and Kodable Creator. The first step is we always brainstorm. I'm sure you do this a lot in school. So the Kodable team gets together and we come up with an idea. Our team works together to come up with ideas just like you and your classmates might. So this top picture, you can see, this is kind of like our event for Kodable Basics. And so the idea we came up with is that we wanted students to be able to create Valentine's Day themed mazes and decorate them, and then they can send them to a friend or a parent or someone at home. And so that was our idea for Kodable Basics. And then for Kodable Creator, we decided to make a really fun themed platformer game. And so you can see on the bottom picture, the goal was students can kind of change objects, and then they were able to code their character to jump on platforms that were Valentine's Day themed. So that's always step one, is we kind of just like sit down, come up with a bunch of different ideas, and think about what would be really fun and engaging for you all. The next part is sketching. So Greg is our artist, and he begins sketching ideas based on the team's brainstorming session. So once we kind of have like a good plan, we tell Greg, and Greg just starts drawing. And I know I can't see you guys, but raise your hand if you like doing art, because I love doing art. So I feel like this would be such a fun job. So this is another thing. Maybe you want to be a game developer like Chloe, or maybe you want to be an artist like Greg. Greg starts creating them digitally on the computer. So he takes what he drew on paper and then he has to put them actually onto the computer. So you can see that we have our heart and our love muffin. And so this is kind of what it looks like from drawing. And then this is what it looks like digitally. And then same thing with the muffin. This is the Kodable Basics digital art. This is kind of like some of the pieces that Greg designed. So he drew these little flowers. He designed these tunnels that you can roll through, these really cute heart balloons, and these little like heart stamps that you can put throughout. So these are all things that he thought about, drew them, and then decided that he wanted them in the game. So animation is what makes the art move and the characters move within the game. Our team uses a few different programs. The main one that they use is Spine. And so those of you who did the Kodable Creator event, Spine, you're familiar with Catbot. Catbot was actually created with Spine, and Spine essentially allows the characters and the images to come to life. So maybe their arms move, or they're able to blink, or they're able to do a little dance. So Spine is an animation software for the video games that we create. And so I'll kind of show you what some of the animation looks like. So we can have the muffin jump. And so all of that is possible with animation. So Greg does a lot of the artwork. Now Chloe and the other game developers on the Kodable team are actually going to put the Valentine's Day event together. So our developers use a program called Unity. Unity is a coding software where they're able to control everything kind of like behind the scenes for the game. And what's really neat is the same concepts that you learn in Kodable. So whether it's conditions or loops or functions, Chloe and the other game developers actually all use the same coding concepts. They look a little bit differently because since we're in elementary or middle school, it looks differently than what Chloe is doing, but the concepts are the same. So on the right, you can actually see Chloe is creating lines of text coding. And this is kind of what it looks like for her. So this is another screenshot of Unity and kind of like all of the different things that they manipulate to make the game what it is. Here's another one. So you can see kind of all of the artwork that Greg created is in there, and then they're able to manipulate it within Unity. Once all of the coding is done, you'll see that a lot just happened. We had to create art. We had to put the art in digitally. Chloe and the development team had to put in lines of code to make the game actually function. They had to animate it. So the last step is that we actually need our it's called a QA analyst or a quality assurance, so QA. And so our QA person at Kodable's name is Helen, and Helen actually gets to play the game all day. And what's really cool is that she plays the game and she essentially tries to break the game. So she just like does crazy things. She sees if things are working as expected. And what she does is she finds bugs in the code. And so just like you might make mistakes when you're coding, our developers make mistakes sometimes too. And so Helen is able to kind of find the bugs or the errors in the line of code and fix them. And so this is a really fun job because she's able to kind of be silly, find the bugs, and then this way we're able to release a game to you all that is easy to use and you don't get stuck. And so this is just kind of a last step of the process. Ta-da! Now we have a finished game. So we really hope you enjoyed a very quick behind the scenes on like how the events were created from start to finish. Again, we have 2 events this year, which is really exciting. These are some characters that you might see in Kodable Basics and Kodable Creator, but keep in mind they were all drawn by Greg and then put into the game digitally, which is really neat.
And we'll get to answer some questions here, but first I'd like to introduce Chloe. So Chloe is Kodable's senior game developer. So what does that mean? That's like a really big title there. Chloe basically brings all the magic to these Kodable games and makes them happen. So a game developer is someone who actually is making the video game. So she's writing the instructions or the code, just like you guys are writing code within the game. And she is able to make characters move or design how the game looks, create these fun challenges for players. So if you guys are enjoying all these games, you definitely have Chloe to thank for making so much of that happen. And Chloe's going to now have an opportunity to give us a little deep dive of kind of what that looks like on her end when she's making all this really great stuff happen. So we'll get to hear from her.
So as Danielle mentioned, I'm Chloe. I'm a game developer at Kodable, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through kind of some stuff I do in Unity and code and show you our thought processes behind how we make these. You can see in here is creator. So this is the game that you are familiar with if you've played it. And I can go in and I can make all these changes. I can change my background. So we'll go to the Valentine's Day one. We'll add in a catstronaut and an alien. So this is essentially, we took Unity to go and make it into a smaller window so that you have access to a lot of the same stuff that we have access to. So you can come in here and you can make changes to the catstronaut. Let's say we want a giant catstronaut. But then as a game dev, I'm sitting over here and I'm looking and maybe this isn't as giant as I want catstronaut to be. Maybe I want giant catstronaut. I want cats taking up the whole screen. So I can't do that through here. So what I need to actually do is I will go over into the code. So this is my code editor, where within Creator, you have the code editor that you're adding for each object, I have this. And I have a similar thing over here where I can see all the different scripts. I can go through and make changes everywhere, but this here's the one that I want to be concerned about. So this is what controls our game sizes. So you can see here, giant, that size is 3. Big is 1.5. Tiny is 0.3. So it's very small. But let's make giant, let's say we want it to be 30. And then we can save this. I can come back over here. You can see it goes through, and this is just it. It does something called compiling, which is a fancy way to say the computer is reading the changes that I just made, so that we can see them within the game. Let's go into free create, and we'll add our cat back in. You can see it's still the same size that it was for the normal one, and you can see the same comparison on the alien. But now, if I go and I make this giant, it is huge. That might have gone a little bit too big. That might be too giant. Maybe I should have done like a 6 or something, but the 30 is very big. So that's how we make changes in the code. Unity also offers some kind of ways to test this out without needing to go through the whole process of going back and forth and into the code, because sometimes that can be a little bit time consuming. You can see it only took like 30 seconds to go and make that change. But let's say I wanted to figure out exactly what size I want to do, so I only need to make the change once. I can go and I can find the cat object in the scene here. And then this, you can see over here, is very similar to what we have over here, but these ones don't change if I can't save these changes. These are just changes while I'm playing the game. So I can go over and find the cat, and I can see the scale, which is just a fancy way of saying size. And you can see it's now set to 30, which is the same value that I set earlier. And I could change this back to 3, which is what it was when it was giant. And I could play with this, and I could find a size that I like before I go and make the change in the code. And it just gives you easy ways to play around and figure out what you actually want for things. And you can drag it. I can make it upside down. You can do things like, right now, this has X, Y, and Z. If you're familiar with coordinate systems, these are essentially the X direction this way, Y direction this way, and then Z goes into the screen. We don't actually use Z because that would be if we were doing a 3D game like Minecraft or Roblox, but we deal exclusively in just X and Y. But I can do fun things like unlink them, and then I can make a cat pancake. And then I can rotate it. And you can do fun stuff like this and play around, and it gives you all this flexibility to make fun things and then figure out what you do and don't like, and then you go back into the code and you make it happen more permanently rather than just messing around in here. But you can have a lot of fun things to play around with.
How or when did you start coding?
Ooh, that's a good question. I started coding when I was probably about 10. And I had different games that I would code in. We had something called Neopets, which was a game, and you could go in and you could make new pages for your pets. And that was my first experience. And then I just found a lot of fun things to do along the side, kind of all the way out through my childhood, different ways to expand and grow my coding, and then eventually decided I want to do this as my job.
How many different jobs are there at Kodable?
We have a few different teams. So we have our product team, which is their primary focus is figuring out what we want out of the games and how we get them there. And that includes Emmy and Danielle. So they're talking to teachers and they're talking with our designers to figure out what we want to do and how we get there. So that we have Emmy and Danielle, which are kind of like work in the teacher outreach and figuring out the design of the game. We have dedicated game designers. We have Larry. I think he's listening in over here. He goes through and figures out, okay, how do we take that stuff and design a fun game for people to play? We have Gao, who also does that game design. And then we have the artists like Greg, like Emmy was talking about, who then will go and make art for whatever direction we want to go. And then we have the game developers who then do the actual coding to build that out. We have QA to go and make sure it works well on the other side. And then we have a support team who will then go and make sure that they'll listen to any kind of bugs or concerns that come in afterwards from teachers. So if your teacher is ever on the dashboard and is saying, hey, I have this issue. Can you help me with this? We have a team of people who help with that. And then we have people who are also handle some marketing. So there's a lot of different roles.
What encouraged you to start coding?
I really like solving puzzles and solving, like problem solving is always what I liked the most growing up. In school, anything that was like a puzzle to try to figure out or a challenge. And I feel like coding is a lot of that. So when I was trying to figure out what do I want to do for work, I wanted to do something that I enjoyed and had fun doing. And that was something where I knew I would enjoy, and I decided to kind of see if I could pursue it, and it worked out.
And what is the most important part of the code in the Valentine's Kodable activity?
I think the most important part, because that one is about the platforming, so you're jumping from little, boxes to get to the end. I think the most important part is the figuring out the jumping and the character controls, because you want to make sure that when you hit a button to try to jump, you see what happens on the screen and it's what you expect. And that you aren't falling through boxes, or that you aren't, accidentally walking off the edge. So there's some really interesting things that you do for platforming games like that, and you'll find it with things like Mario as well, where there's something called coyote time, which is basically you can walk a little bit off of the edge and still jump. And there's things like that you kind of learn as you start to make games that make it feel more natural, because it's really annoying if you just take one little half step off the edge and you fall. You still want to be able to jump. So it's trying to make sure that feels good.
Someone says, how many hours does it take you to code a game?
Oh, it could take anywhere from an hour to 1,000 hours. It depends on how big the game is. So like initially making Creator, that was probably about 1,000 hours to build out. But then the actual making the mini games within it, like making High Flyer or making Run and Jump, each of those is, maybe 100 hours or so. But then you can make things like, if you want to just make a fun mini game, like you could make a tic-tac-toe kind of video game and do that in a couple hours. So it really depends on the scale of the game that you're trying to make. Some things like, a big game like a Skyrim or something that has hundreds of people working a lot of hours to do, especially when you account in like all the time making art and the coding and the QA. There's a lot of time that goes into making a game.
Did you have a favorite video game when you were little?
When I was little, my favorite video game, it's still one of my favorite, it's going to show how old I am, but Donkey Kong Country 2 on the Super Nintendo is, I think, my favorite childhood game.
Have you ever coded something other than something on Kodable? And what is your favorite game you've ever made?
I have coded stuff outside of Kodable. I actually used to work in coding for doing airplane design and making tools for that, so less game focused, but different application of coding. So it's a lot of the same ideas of using loops and functions and figuring out what user inputs make what user outputs. I did work at another game company before this, but the game didn't end up making it out onto full release, unfortunately. But it was still a good learning experience. And then besides that, I make a lot of small games in my free time. I make fun little puzzle games and exploration games. So yeah.
This one might kind of be related to that one. Then this says, what is your favorite thing to code?
My favorite thing to code, for me, it's about having a problem to solve and figuring out how to do it, how to use code to solve the problem. So as long as it's like an interesting challenge or an interesting problem, then I'm going to love coding it.
What would someone study if they wanted a typical, like a similar job to yours?
Yeah, their computer science is the primary one for coding, but also I don't have a computer science degree. My degree is in mechanical engineering, because like I said, I worked with airplanes first, and then kind of moved over. So I think if you were going to college with the intent of doing programming, computer science is probably the best one. But I think there is a lot of potential avenue for being able to teach yourself and figure out what you want and take your own skills and apply them to wherever you want to end up.
And how long have you worked at Kodable?
Oh, I have worked at Kodable, it's almost 3 years.
How many people does it take to create a game?
Again, it depends on the size of the game. So, like the big games that you play on, like an Xbox or PlayStation, a lot of those have hundreds of people. Kodable, we have about 12, and it kind of changes a little bit here and there, but it really depends on the size of the game. Or you'll have games that are a single person. Like if you've ever heard of Stardew Valley, that was one person who spent like 7 or 8 years making it, and it is an incredible game. But it also it can take as many people, and the more people you have, the shorter it'll take. So it really depends on what you're trying to do.
Let me jump in really. I just want to brag for Chloe for a second and just mention that since you guys are asking so many great questions, something that to note that Chloe and the other game developers have been working on is we are actually releasing a ton of STEM courses in Kodable Creator. So they're not just going to be game design, but they're going to be science courses and engineering courses and some math courses. And so it just goes to show that coding, you can kind of create whatever you have in your mind. And so these are some really kind of like exciting updates that are going to be in the game soon.
What coding platforms you use to make the games?
Yeah, so we use Unity at Kodable. That's one of the big ones. The other ones, at least for game design, there's also Unreal, which a lot of bigger games will use. And then there's a newer one that's come out in the last couple of years that I know a lot of people like. It's called Godot. Those are really the three main ones that people use for making games. Other than that, a lot of people will just do it from scratch. Like if you're going to the super high-end video game studios, they're going to not even use any of those three programs. They're going to do it all from scratch and build out their own systems because they'll want the game to function exactly how they want it without needing that certain architecture in place already.
Okay, thank you, Chloe, for answering so many questions. Those were really great questions, you guys.
Yes, yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
Let us know if you need anything, and we hope you guys have a very happy Valentine's Day, and we will see you soon. Bye, everybody. Thank you.